Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Sometimes in the investing world, you get these little whispers about a company or a technology that feels like it's about to explode. And for me right now, that whisper is all about IonQ, ticker symbol IonQ, and the mind-boggling world of quantum computing.
It's definitely more than just a whisper at this point. The buzz around quantum computing is getting louder by the day. What's captivating everyone's imagination is that this isn't just about making our laptops a bit faster. Quantum computing has the potential to rewrite the rules of what computers can even do.
Okay, so before we get too deep into IonQ, can you give us a quick breakdown of what makes quantum computing so different? What problems can it solve that our current computers can't even touch?
Think of it this way. A regular computer uses bits, which are like tiny switches that can be either on or off,
Hmm.
a 1 or a 0. Quantum computers use qubits, which are like those switches, but weirder. They can be both on and off at the same time, thanks to the magic of quantum mechanics.
Whoa, okay. My brain already hurts a little.
That's understandable. It's a pretty wild concept. But this weirdness is what gives quantum computers their power. They can tackle problems that would take classical computers millions of years, maybe even longer, in a fraction of the time. We're talking things like designing life-saving drugs, creating entirely new materials, or cracking the encryption that protects our online data.
Okay, so huge implications,
Mhm.
potentially world-changing stuff. So where does IonQ fit into all of this? What makes them stand out in what I'm guessing is a pretty crowded field?
For starters, they're not just playing around in the theoretical realm, they're actually building and selling working quantum computers. And they're not just selling them to universities for research. We're talking about big-name companies like AstraZeneca who are partnering with IonQ to use quantum computers for drug discovery.
Now, that's a partnership that gets my attention as an investor. So what's the secret sauce here? What makes IonQ's technology different from what everyone else is doing?
IonQ specializes in what's called trapped ion quantum computing. It's a mouthful. But basically, they use individual atoms, which are trapped in place by electromagnetic fields, as their qubits. It's a bit like suspending incredibly tiny magnets in midair and then manipulating them with lasers to perform calculations.
So what's the advantage of trapping ions compared to other approaches?
Think of it like this. Some other approaches are kind of like trying to build a computer out of incredibly delicate snowflakes. They're powerful but incredibly sensitive to any kind of disturbance. Trapped ions are more like building a computer out of tiny diamonds. They're robust, stable, and hold on to their quantum properties for much longer.
That makes sense. It sounds like IonQ has a real edge in terms of the stability and reliability of their technology. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. How is the company actually performing in the market?
Well, let's look at their financials. In the third quarter of 2024, IonQ reported a year-over-year revenue increase of 102%, bringing in a cool $12.4 million. And get this, their projected revenue for the full year is between $38.5 million and $42.5 million. That's some serious growth,
Yeah.
especially for a company that's still relatively small.
Okay, that definitely gets my attention. But we all know that revenue isn't the whole story. What about profitability? Are they actually making money?
That's where things get a little more complicated.
Huh.
They reported a net loss of $52.5 million in Q3 of 2024, which might sound alarming, but remember, we're talking about a company operating in a brand new, incredibly complex, rapidly evolving industry.
So should we be worried about those losses?
Not necessarily. Here's why. IonQ currently has a cash reserve of $382.8 million. In the world of startups, cash is king. This war chest allows them to invest heavily in research and development, which is crucial in a field like quantum computing.
And they can weather any short-term market fluctuations,
Right.
which we know are inevitable.
Precisely. They're playing the long game, building a solid foundation for long-term success. And it seems like Wall Street is starting to take notice. Benchmark recently raised their price target for IonQ from $20 to a whopping $50, maintaining a buy rating.
Wow, that's a big vote of confidence. So it sounds like IonQ has a lot going for them.
They do, but it's crucial to remember that investing in a company like IonQ is not for the faint of heart. It's a high-risk, high-reward proposition. We're talking about a company at the bleeding edge of a technology that could change the world.
All right, you've definitely piqued our interest. Before we move on, anything else we need to know about IonQ before we dig a little deeper?
Well, I think it's important to remember that while IonQ is making headlines, they're not the only player in the quantum computing game. You've got giants like IBM and Google dipping their toes in the water, and smaller companies like Rigetti and D-Wave making their own moves.
So how does IonQ stack up against the competition? Are they truly leading the pack?
It's a complex landscape. to be sure. IBM and Google have enormous resources, and they're integrating quantum computing into their broader cloud offerings. But their revenue from quantum computing specifically is a bit murky. It's hard to get a clear picture of how much they're actually making.
It sounds like comparing apples to oranges a bit.
Exactly. IonQ is laser-focused on quantum computing, and their growth in that specific sector is undeniable. They're like a speedboat zipping past those massive cruise ships.
I love that analogy. And what about those other companies, Rigetti and D-Wave? Are they series contenders?
They're definitely worth keeping an eye on, but they haven't achieved the same level of performance or those game-changing partnerships that IonQ has locked down.
Speaking of those partnerships,
Yeah.
let's talk a bit more about that Air Force contract. A $54.5 million deal to develop quantum networking. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it. Quantum networking could revolutionize communication as we know it. Imagine a world where information is transmitted instantly and with absolute security, thanks to the principles of quantum mechanics.
Okay, now I'm picturing teleportation and interstellar communication. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. For us everyday investors, what did all of this mean? Should we be rushing to buy IonQ stock?
Whoa there, hold your horses. Remember what we said earlier. This is high-risk territory. Investing in IonQ is essentially a bet on the future of quantum computing. And while the potential rewards are huge, the risks are equally significant.
So how should we be thinking about IonQ as a potential investment?
It all comes down to your personal risk tolerance and investment goals. If you're looking for a safe, steady return, IonQ is probably not the right fit for them.
But for those who are willing to embrace a bit more risk.
If you're excited about the potential of quantum computing and you believe in IonQ's ability to execute on their vision, then it could be a very intriguing addition to your portfolio.
But as with any investment, we have to do our due diligence.
Absolutely. Don't just take our word for it. Dive into their financial statements. Read analyst reports. Follow industry news. And make sure you understand the technology and the competitive landscape.
Great advice. Now let's talk a bit more about the financial side of things. You mentioned that IonQ isn't currently profitable, but they have a hefty cash reserve. Can you walk us through what that means for investors?
Sure. That cash gives them the runway to continue investing in R&D, to attract top talent, and to weather any short-term storms. They're not in a position where they need to scramble for funding, which gives them a significant advantage in this fast-paced industry.
So they're playing the long game, building for the future.
Precisely. And that's something to keep in mind when evaluating their financial performance. Don't just focus on short-term profits. Look at their overall strategy and their ability to execute on it.
And on that note, they seem to be executing quite well. Their revenue growth has been impressive, and they keep landing those big-name partnerships.
They're definitely building momentum. But remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The quantum computing race is just getting started.
So what are some of the key things investors should be watching for as IonQ continues to grow and evolve?
First and foremost, keep an eye on their technological progress. Are they continuing to hit their performance milestones? Are they developing new and innovative applications for their quantum computers?
And how are they faring against the competition? Are they maintaining their lead, or are others starting to catch up?
Those are all crucial questions to consider. You'll also want to pay attention to their financial performance. Will they be able to reach profitability in a reasonable time frame? Will they continue to secure those lucrative contracts?
And how are they managing their cash flow? Are they investing wisely, or are they burning through their reserves too quickly?
It's like a puzzle, isn't it? Putting all these pieces together to get a clearer picture of IonQ's overall health and their potential for long-term success.
It is, and it's a puzzle that's constantly changing. That's what makes investing so fascinating, but also so challenging.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of challenges, let's talk about the volatility of IonQ's stock.
Okay, yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on. We saw the stock surge over 140% in November alone, but then like you said, investing in a company like this is not for the faint of heart. There are going to be ups and downs.
Absolutely. IonQ is a relatively small company operating in a very speculative market. That kind of volatility is to be expected.
So how should investors approach this volatility? Is it something to be afraid of, or is it an opportunity?
It all depends on your investment style and risk tolerance. If you're a long-term investor, those short-term fluctuations shouldn't deter you.
You're in it for the long haul, riding out those waves.
Exactly. But if you're more of a short-term trader, looking to capitalize on those price swings, then volatility can be your friend. Just remember, it's a double-edged sword. You could make a lot of money quickly, but you could also lose a lot just as fast.
So proceed with caution.
Always. And don't forget the golden rule of investing. Never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Great advice. Anything else you think is important for investors to keep in mind as they consider adding IonQ to their portfolio?
Well, one thing I always emphasize is the importance of diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, no matter how promising that basket might seem. Spread your risk across different asset classes, different industries, and different companies.
Yeah.
That way, if one investment doesn't pan out, it won't sink your entire portfolio.
Solid advice. So we've talked about the company, the technology, the financials, the competition, the risks. Is there anything we've missed? Anything else you think is important to mention?
You know, it really has been a fascinating conversation. I always enjoy exploring this kind of cutting-edge stuff, and IonQ is a perfect example of a company that's pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I'm definitely walking away from this with a lot more knowledge about quantum computing and IonQ's place in it. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your big picture perspective. Where do you see quantum computing going in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a bit like trying to predict the internet in the early 90s. No one could have foreseen the way it would transform our lives. I think we're at a similar inflection point with quantum computing.
So you're saying we should buckle up and prepare for a wild ride?
Exactly. We're going to see quantum computers becoming more powerful, more accessible, and more integrated into our everyday lives.
What are some of the specific areas where you think quantum computing will have the biggest impact?
Medicine is a huge one. Quantum computers could help us develop new drugs and therapies at an unprecedented pace, potentially leading to cures for diseases that are currently incurable.
So imagine personalized medicine tailored to your specific genetic makeup, thanks to quantum computing.
Exactly. And material science is another area ripe for disruption. Quantum computers could help us design entirely new materials with properties we can barely imagine today. Think lighter, stronger materials for everything from airplanes to smartphones.
That's wild. What about the financial world? Any potential applications there?
Absolutely. Quantum computers could revolutionize financial modeling, risk management, and algorithmic trading. They could even help us develop new forms of encryption to secure our financial transactions in a world where cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated.
It sounds like quantum computing is going to touch just about every aspect of our lives in some way.
I think that's a safe bet. And the companies that are leading the charge in quantum computing today, like IonQ, are likely to be the giants of tomorrow.
Okay, so let's circle back to IonQ.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways for our listeners who are thinking about investing in this company?
First and foremost, understand that this is a long-term play. Quantum computing is still in its early stages. And it's going to take time for these companies to fully realize their potential.
But patience is key.
Absolutely. You also need to be comfortable with risk. IonQ is a volatile stock, and there's no guarantee that they'll be the ultimate winner in the quantum computing race.
But they do seem to have a lot of things going for them.
They do. Their trapped ion technology is showing a lot of promise. Their financial position is solid. And they've got those strategic partnerships that are giving them real-world traction.
So for investors who are excited about the future of quantum computing and are looking for exposure to this potentially game-changing technology, IonQ is definitely a company worth considering.
I couldn't agree more. Just remember to do your research, diversify your portfolio, and never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Sound advice.
Mhm.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd just say this. Stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to embrace the future. Quantum computing is an incredible technology that has the potential to change the world in profound ways. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to make the next big breakthrough.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure.